Hello everyone, my name is Rishikesh Nare and we welcome you to our special series, The Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories. It's an initiative by ETH. Now, to key to cutting chai conversation is to have a good discussion around the areas of your early life: education to grooming, training, business sense, skill augmentation to work-life balance. Before we begin, let me set the context right. Cutting Chai is a series of candid conversations where we take you through the inspirational journeys of influential people. You all have seen these personalities in the corporate world, but we are just taking them away from the boardroom drama to have some fun chat around their personal life. So today we have with us Radhika Gupta, MD and CEO, Edelweiss AMC. Radhika, first of all, thank you so much, and it's my honor to have this conversation with you, uh, because of course there are so many achievements that you've done, but before even before we started the interview, uh, I don't know, the calmness that you have, it makes us feel relaxed, so we can start the conversation whenever you're ready.
I'm all good and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Radhika, let's start at the very beginning. Take us through your childhood days, your school, time spent with that first set of friends that we have. We will always have this first set of friends. So, just take us through those days.
Okay, so my childhood was a little unconventional. I'll come to the friends bit in a bit. My father, as some people know, was a diplomat, Indian diplomat. So he moved countries every 3 years. So I was born in Pakistan. I was born in Islamabad in 83. And it's a strange place to spend your childhood. It's always odd being the Indian born in Pakistan, especially after partition. That's a separate set of stories. And he essentially moved every 3 years. So he moved from Pakistan to the New York and then Delhi. So we moved around every 3 years. Now, because of this, and there are good and bad parts of this as a child, I think the good part, which you don't realize as a child, is you get a lot of exposure to sort of different parts of the world, different school systems. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I wish my kid had a childhood like that. The bad part is I actually don't have any memories of early childhood friends. Because you change countries so much, you also change languages so much. So I remember growing up in Pakistan, largely speaking Urdu and Hindi at home. I mean, I didn't speak any English. And then when we moved to New York, because I had to go to school there, my parents said, scrap all the Hindi and let's just move to English. And then we moved back to Delhi. And so there was all that. So I don't think till at least till high school, I had any sense of close friends. In fact, even in high school, I didn't. My real set of first close friends comes from college. So when people talk about school friends, I'm like, okay, I don't fully relate. And those were not the days and ages of Facebook and things like that,
Yeah.
on digital mediums where you could keep in touch. And mail doesn't work really well in places like Nigeria. I mean, the post mail that used to come and once a month bag aata tha, to wo hota nahi tha zyada. So I think that's my, so it was a fantastic childhood. We were very, very colorful, very different experiences, but a very unconventional one.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a very difficult state to be in, because even if you see any, nowadays, any movies or any stories, they talk about, friendship, their childhood days. And when you can't relate to that, that's a horrific thing, right? So it's a strange kind of a thing. But at the other end, the kind of exposure, who would get to, visit another country after every 3 years? That is something, uh, or every kid would want to do it. And maybe that exploration part helps you uh, grow in a different way. Your character builds first and then you learn things. And characteristics, if you build better characteristic, we have a example, right? And I have an example right in front of me. I don't know how people can become successful. So is that the recipe of having that exposure at an early age?
So I think the exposure, I mean, if you ask me personally, if I think of how I am, good or bad, my early childhood has probably been a big driver of shaping. I mean, one of the things, and they say this at work about me, is that I handle chaos, change very comfortably. I actually quite enjoy it. I mean, I keep saying I'm a child of chaos. In the workplace, we see people often struggle with change. I'm very easy with it. When I moved back from the US to India to start my own business, I was very easy about living in India. And I think that comes from a childhood that constantly had change, that forced us to deal with different kinds of people, adapt to them without being very, very judgmental. So in that sense, I think the childhood has been very transformative, which is why, as I said, whenever I have kids, I wish they have a childhood like that, although I don't think they will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there is a curriculum which that can allow, a child to change his, not even country, but even states. Even if you roam around states, you learn so many things. Like, I understood this fact after I started working. Then I, started visiting different countries or different part of our country, and then I realized, oh, the people is the key, right? If you know how to deal with them, and if you know how to just get things done from different kind of brains, then you can reach where you want to. I mean, yeah, that's the second sign. I'm going to share this secret with everyone, and definitely I'll give you that due credit, because that's a very interesting, part of your life, and should be, spoken about more often. Then your again high school days. So was it like a typical high school what we see in movies like New York, and then is buzzing all around, and every kid is very aspirational, be it academics or maybe sports? Was it like a typical one?
No, it was actually a little bit like so both my Nigeria and Italy high schools were a little bit like Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, or I guess Student of the Year, if you've seen. Uh, so academics was really not the cool thing. Like the cool kids were not into academics. They were either into extracurriculars or proms, and they were very obsessed with how they look, and it's teenagers and it's women, etc., etc. So no, it was actually not a very aspirational high school, and it was an interesting change for me because my middle school in Delhi was in Delhi Public School, Arkepuram. And anybody who's from Delhi and knows Delhi Public School, Arkepuram, knows how aspirational it is. I mean, they used to have an ability section, which I think has been canned now, where all the 90% plus kids were stacked together. And, if you got above a certain percentage, you got a scholar badge. So, like, you literally wore your marks on your sleeve. And then I transition to these two schools that were, as I said, straight out of, Archie's or Student of the Year. So I think you had to, and unfortunately, I have no athletic talent and I have no musical talent, none whatsoever. And I was a very chubby teenager, right? I was born very chubby and I had braces and glasses. So, and I wore cheap clothes. So I actually became academically inclined because I went to
Okay.
these schools and academics was my respite from everything else.
Yeah, but knowledge, I'm telling you, nothing can surpass knowledge. If you have knowledge, and that is the coolest thing that someone can have. Because even the athletes that, I have spoken to, I've interviewed, everyone has their own sort of intelligence. That is how they go closer to that particular mark. Maybe if you're talking to a professional badminton player, even if you don't like badminton, but the process that, they go through, it's a scientific process, and that's how they win medals, right? So yeah, academics, very important. So then later on, you moved back to India, or?
So I went to college at Wharton after that. I decided, and I was the first one to study abroad in the family. And we kind of, my mother and I went through that process. So I went to the US to do my undergrad, which I did for 4 years. That I think is a very different experience. I mean, that's probably the best educational experience I've had because that is everything that you sort of see in the movies. Ivy League
Yeah.
school, extremely aspirational. Amazing set of students, amazing academic environment. I mean, just sitting in the classroom. So I think, and that's where I made sort of my first real set of friends, but very, very aspirational group of people. Incidentally, it's hilarious. 2, 3 days ago, there was a Business Today ranking of some top 50 women in finance. Three of us are from the same graduating class.
What do you say?
Yeah, so and all of us are on our little friends group and we're chatting.
Yeah.
And class of 2005 had three of those girls. So that's how aspirational that group was.
Yeah, I mean, it's again with three people from one batch, and it's like, "Arey yaar, dekha tune?" It's like, you've seen that. Yeah, 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 even I'm about. So again, your educational part had happened there, and then what were you had any expectations when it comes to your work? Like if someone is studying filmmaking, so he expects, okay, I want to become a director or I want to become a cinematographer. So you had any expectations from yourself at that young age?
I think kids today have a lot more clarity and expectation than we did. Now, I came from a background where dad was in government. So in his world, it was public sector and everything else was private sector. There was no nuance of there is investment banking, and there is consulting, and there's technology. I mean, it was public sector and private sector. The whole family has either been in teaching or public sector. So when I went to Wharton, I think the objective was I would just get a job. And when I had these conversations with my parents, they were like, all of these are just jobs that are paying you a lot of money in really good companies. So I didn't go in knowing that I wanted to be a finance kid, so to say. And I think that's okay. I think many of us discover our careers, right? We don't have to have all the answers on day one. So I ended up in finance by a lark. I did some internships in technology. My first internship was actually Microsoft. I did a stint in consulting at McKinsey. I ended up on Wall Street, and I have been a money manager for the last 15 years. But was it planned? No, it wasn't planned, just because I didn't have enough exposure. Today, as I said, there is a lot more clarity and a lot more
Yeah.
exposure, because we also live in a more digital age where information is out there.
Yeah, nowadays kids, they have the options. I mean, they're so clear. Sometimes I get so scared that eventually my niece and like the kids at my home, they will take up my job in next 10 years, and they're so advanced and they don't feel like it's like a work. They're like, no, we're passionate about certain things, and the way they present things, they're in a different level altogether. So your academic journey, if I asked you to pick one teacher that you remember, and if yes, then what is the reason that you remember him or her?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have an answer, and it's if I asked you to guess the subject, most people would be surprised. So I actually have the fondest memories, and it's not from Wharton. It's from my Italy years, my 11th and 12th. I did the IB curriculum. My English literature teacher. Now, when people think of me, they think of me as a finance kid, and I studied computer science and finance in college. And now I'm talking to you about English literature. But at our heart, so I studied. Fairly advanced level of literature in those years. And I think my English teacher, her name is Christine Nace, I still thank her. She pushed me a lot. She really sort of set very, very high bars. She taught me about the attention to detail. So every assignment she had, if you would make a mistake, and those days we used to submit handwritten stuff,
Yeah.
she would catalog those mistakes every time. And three times, if she would make a folder on each child, if you made the mistake thrice, she would ask you questions. So she taught me detailing, she taught me perfection. And I love to write, which is why I do write on social media, and I will hopefully do more long form written content. But that love of writing comes entirely from her.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but don't you think it was too challenging? Because sometimes if you don't like mathematics, you're cool. Like, I don't like maths, I don't understand. But language is something that maths, you can get it right, right? 1 + 1 2, you can get it right. Language is a gray area somewhere, and you have to keep on struggling things. I have seen people doing literature, and I thought it's right for me, it's gold for me when I read it, and they're saying no. When I go to my mentor, they say that it's crap. They don't want, they just they tear it off. So I can understand that part. But yeah, again, that helps you today. You can articulate things much better.
I
uh,
think communication is so underrated. I mean, we
yeah.
grow up in India teaching our kids to be math and science obsessed, and
Yeah.
we totally, and then you sit in the workplace today, and your biggest struggles are with people who can't articulate their thoughts, because ultimately none of us do rocket science, right? We are doing things, and we have to present them and articulate them and communicate them clearly, whether it's financial products or whether you're selling soap. I mean, it's
Yeah.
ultimately about that. So that ability to communicate, that ability to articulate sharply, I think is so important. And it comes, so an English literature education gives you a lot of confidence to go out there, speak, write, communicate.
Yeah, that most of the times, your better ideas are never shared by most of the people because they're scared, and people think that they're less confident. No, they're not less confident, they just don't know how to put it across. So just treading on to that, do you remember your first job interview? Since you were so good at articulation, so you must be confident, right?
No, I wasn't. Yeah, I was a good writer, but I was also very
Okay.
shy. I'm very reserved by nature. I think
Okay.
my job has made me open now. As I said, I've had my own looks related issues, so I was, absolutely not confident at all. I think self confidence is about 4 5 years old. It's not even newer than that. But my first job interview was for a job at Microsoft as a summer intern. And I wasn't sure. I think I was 19 when I went to Seattle. Microsoft has a spectacular campus, and it was a full day of interviews. And I was just most excited that they were putting me up in a five-star hotel and paying $50 for my lunch and dinner. For a college kid, this was a really big deal. I mean, my parents couldn't believe it. So I was very excited by that. I was very overwhelmed by Microsoft, right?
Obviously.
And I was interviewing for Microsoft Office. I mean, these are products we know and love and use. And I think just seeing that campus, it was very, very overwhelming.
So how was the reaction at home? कि यार मतलब कोई tech company है या फिर कुछ है, and
Oh,
that's where she's
they were
working.
they were excited. But the funny thing is, when I got the job at Microsoft, I went back to the hotel and I called my parents from that hotel, and I spoke to them for a long time. And I said, they're paying me some $4,000-5,000 a month for this internship. My father was like, you're 19. And then I realized at the end of the call that I had been speaking on an international call for 15 minutes, and I had racked up this humongous bill. And I realized that I should never do again.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, you should spend that amount. That's Microsoft. Come on, and of course, anybody would spend thousands of dollars because एक news है यार. This is the news that stays with you for a lifetime. It's Microsoft. When Microsoft, Apple is Microsoft. And so then, when you started your journey, you ever thought that maybe I will come back to India, maybe, and I'll do something, or you were very clear with your thoughts that let me just do things here. There are tech giants are present in US. There are companies present in other countries. But why did you come back to India?
I had no plans to come back to India. I didn't plan my career out. I decided to come back to India on a lark. I think at some level, if I think about it, my father, I've always been a big patriot, daughter of someone in the government. My father always said at some point you should come back to India and do something. So I think subconsciously it was in the back of my head. But I came back to India to start a business. I just thought that doing what I wanted to do from a business point of view would not be viable in the US because there are so many of those opportunities out there. But India is such an underpenetrated and such an underdeveloped market that it was a decision taken on a lark. And as I said, I haven't been someone, at least in the early years, who's done a lot of planning in my career. I've sort of taken whatever opportunities there are and tried to max them at that point in time.
Yeah, and so before we move to the next segment, this question I love to ask this question. So if I give you a time machine, okay, and you don't have to worry about anything, just trust our technology. If I give you a time machine and if I take you to a 9-year-old Radhika, what message that you want to give it to her right
now? I think be yourself. Life will work out.
That's it. That's about it.
Yeah, be yourself. Life will work out.
Okay, that's so sweet and that's a short. Yeah, you're clear that okay, even that 9-year-old Radhika, even then she was cooler, and eventually just one formula, just be yourself.
Probably very stressed. I mean, I remember going through my teenage years very, very stressed about small things. It really works out, and ultimately you do a good job at being yourself, and you end up just fine.
Yeah, and sorry, but out of curiosity, one more question before we move to the next segment, because it is related to startups. When we talk about startups nowadays, 99% of the time you hear about huge investments. This person has got billions. This person has got trillions. But nobody talks about the 5%. Only 5% of the startups they actually succeed, and 95%. Nobody talks about 95%. So anything that you want to talk about, or any message, typical message to those 95% of the people that when they struggle, they fail, they struggle, they fail. What does it do?
I'm glad you brought this up. I think it's unfortunate that so much of the media coverage, and I take nothing away from it, is about X number of unicorns created. But what about all the guys that didn't do it? The amount of big pre-placement salaries or salaries that are on campus. But what about the kids who went through campus rejection? I mean, it happens to all of us, right? And my only point view is that will also happen. That is unfortunately part of the syllabus. And that is a phase that you have to get through. So realize that you're not the only one.
Yeah. So Definitely, we'll see, because even I noticed that, now just Google startup, you will only see those news, the happy news, right? But what about the difficult ones? I mean, they do similar kind of a struggle, similar pitches. They travel, they invest money, they talk to people. People give them assurance, and very few they get
And,
selected.
and that is the reality, which is why I don't think anyone should start up for the glitz and glamour of starting up. I mean, you have to do it if you're going to enjoy the journey. And hopefully the journey will work out. And maybe it doesn't work out, or maybe it has an average outcome. Maybe it doesn't have a unicorn outcome, right? And all of these are realities.
So since you're into finance and you understand this, so we can request that create a tool where startups can register themselves and just get the investors also, and create a platform where people can, an easy platform where people can find the startups as per their budget, and startups get fundings as per their idea. That is something that India needs today, and I can just request this to you. If you get time, think about it and do this. Thank you so much, Radhika. It was pleasure talking to you. 20 minutes, not enough, because the kind of journey that you had. I'm still there in Pakistan, and just imagining your early days before you could realize you moved to another country, then studying in different part of the world and different continents. I mean, you can't even say now countries like Europe, Africa, and US, and then thinking about, let's come back to India. Let's do something. Let's figure out the market and make a mark. And you've managed to do that. So yeah, that's an inspiration. For the best, Radhika. Again, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and those valuable inputs for everyone. Someone who's going to college right now, that person can relate to it, and someone who's starting off with it. So see you around for another conversation in some other platform. But yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you guys. Thank you so much.